Hey, it's Meg. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's junk journal with me, we're going to be doing day 23 of the Junk Journal July challenge. Today's prompt is overlap, and over in the collaboration we have the lovely Louisa Heinzel sharing her take on the day's prompt, so be sure to check that out. It will be linked down below in the description as always. So overlap, I was really excited for this prompt because I think it's just so perfect for collage, which you guys know I love to do collage, and so it really got me thinking about the different ways that you can overlap collage in your journal and use that as a technique to build up your backgrounds on a spread. So I was really focusing on how I could play around with different materials and things, and I thought I would share with you guys a few tips in terms of including overlapping elements within your journal pages and your collages to help them be a little bit more cohesive. So my first tip for you is to think about the papers that you're wanting to include before you start journaling. So whether it's collecting them into a bit of a pile beforehand in terms of the colours or the textures that you want to use, and just taking that time to think about what you might want your collage to look like. Even if you don't have like a concrete plan of what the page is actually going to look like, it can be really helpful to just think about the types of papers that you're wanting to include, because that can help you to create more of a cohesive look to your page. So even if you feel like it's a little bit all over the place, if you're using similar tones and similar textures, that will help to bring it together for you. Another thing to think about is using different sizes of papers. So it really adds interest if you think about the sizes and the shapes of papers that you use. So larger pieces if it's more the background elements, and then as you're adding more and more, you might want to get a little bit smaller with the pieces that you're adding, so that you're not completely covering up obviously the papers that are underneath, and this just adds a bit of depth and dimension, so you can use smaller pieces to create detailed areas, and like I said, larger pieces lend themselves more to the background. So you'll have seen the first couple of pieces that I added to this page were larger pieces, and then I kind of built my way up to smaller pieces that overlap the larger pieces, so it can help to get rid of any lines that you might have where pieces are sort of joining and connecting. So rather than it feeling a bit of a patchwork, laying them over the top of one another and overlapping them can help to sort of eliminate that on your page and build up the collage background that way. And when you're overlapping your paper elements, another tip is to think about the different ways that you can do this. So obviously there's so many different ways that your collage can come out, your background. You could overlap completely. So for example, I used some tracing paper that went over the top of a few different elements, but because that's more sort of on the transparent, translucent side, elements were still able to show through. But if you have something that's more opaque, you might want to overlap things, partially or even just a little bit. You can overlap in different directions, so think about not just vertical but also horizontal, things where it's sort of coming off the edge of a page, maybe at the top or the bottom. There's lots of different sort of layouts that you can use within your background in order to create that variety within your background that you're building. It doesn't matter if not everything is visible, because you'll still see like little bits showing through as you're adding the elements. So I would say to you, don't be too precious about everything that you're adding the papers. It's all about the way that they overlap and sort of complement one another on the page. Another tip is to use a variety of papers when you're building up backgrounds like this in your journal. So as you can see, I've used everything from book papers to sort of paper bags and all little different scraps of things. Nothing's off limits, so you could use patterned paper, you could use tissue paper, cuttings from magazines. Tissue paper is also great. I love using that to add texture. Maybe if you've got bits of wrapping paper saved. I've used wallpaper before. Think about things that are a little bit more on the thinner side. That will help you when you're doing your collage. So I would stay away from things that are thicker. So maybe like the thickest I'd probably use is like scrapbook card. Once you're getting that thickness, it can just create a bit of a bulky background, but sometimes you can, if you carefully sort of peel at certain papers, you'll be able to peel like just the patterned layer off, and that just helps to reduce any bulk that might build up in your journal page, especially if this is the background and you then want to add extra elements on top of it. You want to make sure that it's fairly smooth and kind of, not all bulky with the elements that you're adding onto it. But the variety of papers helps to add a lot of interest to your page, because you've got all those different textures and things going on within the background of your page. As far as adhesive goes for collages like this, I swear by just a bog standard Pritt Stick glue stick. It's never failed me, and if things slightly peel up anyway, I can always just stick them back down. I much prefer a glue stick over a liquid glue, because I don't have to wait for it to dry. I just find it a lot less messy for things like this. But I know people also use Mod Podge glue and things like that as well. So it's all about finding the glue and adhesive that works for you. And as well as adding different textured papers to your journal, you could also think about adding ripped edges with your papers. So you don't always have to just cut them neatly with scissors. You could also just, I just haphazardly tear pretty much everything that goes into my journals. I think it creates a really nice organic look and feel for a collaged background like this. You can also use negative space as well to create a nice effect, so don't feel like you have to completely cover the entirety of the journal page. Sometimes having elements of negative space or the blank page showing through can help to sometimes create like a bit of a focal point of your journal page, or just a bit of breathing space when especially if you've put like loads of patterned papers and things on it. It can help to just sort of balance things out really on your page. Don't be afraid to experiment with the different papers and collage materials that you're using in your journal. It's really fun to play around with the different found papers and ephemera that we come across in our daily lives, and that can also be incorporated within our collages, especially when it comes to junk journaling. So I would say, just lean into that process and have fun with creating your collages. If you are feeling a little bit nervous about putting stuff like directly into your journal, I would recommend checking out masterboards if you haven't come across that idea. It's basically where you get like a larger piece of paper, just completely cover it with loads of different collage materials. People also do like sort of stamping and painting and all sorts of different fun things onto a larger piece of paper, and then you can cut it up then to use either to sort of stick onto your journal page as a background. People also use them for like tags and all sorts of different things in journaling, but that's a really sort of stress-free way of practicing your backgrounds and your collage without the fear of messing it up in your journal, which I promise you cannot do. But if you want to try it out first, that's definitely something I'd recommend. And it's also just really fun to work on such a huge piece of paper. So that would be my top tip for you. So those are all of my tips for you around collaging and sort of overlapping things. I hope you enjoyed journaling along with me. As always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.